Good evening, I'm Sangeeta, Kandola. Extinction Rebellion is planning to disrupt the capital with a fortnight of demonstrations starting on Monday. The climate change campaigners say they will target the square mile and have a few more surprises in store. They're calling on the government to take action. Sam Holder has more.
From a big pink boat blocking the middle of Oxford Circus to scaling Big Ben, blocking bridges with skate parks and protests on top of tube trains. Extinction Rebellion have made their mark and brought central London to a standstill more than once. Now they've announced they're returning for a third year because they say their message about the climate emergency isn't being heard loudly enough. Action starts on Monday at 10 at Trafalgar Square.
Well, often we find that with civil disobedience, people like the idea of it in the past, but they don't like it so much in the present. What we've had in the past is very, very big debriefs. We think and try to learn a lot from what happens and make sure that we're improving our processes all the time.
Are we going to see mass disruption for ordinary Londoners?
There will be some public disruption, but there's also an attempt increasingly from XR, I think, to tell stories through the actions.
The plan is for 2 more weeks of demonstrations. Financial institutions, which they say fund the climate crisis, are in their sights. Extinction Rebellion say much of their action will focus on here, the City of London, the square mile, the financial heart of the capital. But considering it's the end of August, the summer holidays, and many are still working from home, if the aim is disruption, there may not be many people here to actually disrupt. In response to previous unpopular protests, particularly here at Canning Town Station, there are no plans to target public transport. The relationship between the movement and the Met Police is fraught. The Commissioner determined to stop disruption.
They will be met with a fair, lawful, and we have to stick within the law, but firm, and where we possibly can be, preemptive response.
Last September, there were well over 600 arrests and claims from Extinction Rebellion that the police were preventing their right to protest.
A man arrested in March on suspicion of the indecent assault and murder of Stuart Lubbock at the home of entertainer Michael Barrymore has been released without charge. Mr Lubbock was found floating in the swimming pool of Mr Barrymore's Essex home after a party in 2001. A post-mortem found injuries suggesting he had been sexually assaulted. Essex police said there was insufficient evidence for a prosecution of the unnamed 50-year-old. He has been released without further action. A 20-year-old man is in a critical condition after a shooting in East London. Emergency services were called to Raymond Road in Plaistow after reports of a shooting. An 18-year-old man was also shot, but his injuries are not life-threatening. Police are urging anyone with information to come forward. Former Gurkha servicemen have ended a 13-day hunger strike outside Downing Street after the government agreed to meet with them. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says he will meet Nepalese veterans of the British Army who have been protesting over unequal pensions. A charity is warning that children from the poorest families in London are being locked out of early years education. 3- and 4-year-olds of parents who work longer hours in a week get 30 hours funded childcare. But research from the Sutton Trust found the majority of those eligible were higher earners. Chloe Keedy reports.
How do you measure who needs most help? When it comes to early years education, the government has one formula, but it doesn't work for everyone. 3- and 4-year-olds with working parents can have 30 hours a week. But for children of parents who aren't working or who work a limited number of hours, that halves to 15.
Her current setting spreads the 15 hours over 5 days, which means that she's at nursery for 3 hours a day.
Now that Sasha's daughter is 3, she wants to get back to work, but
it's a nightmare. There's not many jobs around which you can work within that time frame. You'd have to factor in travel, which in London is a very big issue, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
This upset Mr. and Mrs. Shampoo.
In London, only around half of 3- to 4-year-olds are entitled to the full 30 hours.
Now, this isn't just about what works best for parents, it's about
what the children are getting out of their nursery experience too. What sort of things do you learn?
ABC.
A report from the Sutton Trust today has accused the government of locking the poorest children out and is calling for access to the full 30 hours to be universal.
Inequality in access to education means that there's a risk it is contributing to actually widening the gap in outcomes for those poorer children for when they go to school. So we're not doing a good job at the moment with putting them on a level playing field to make sure that when they get to school they can equally compete against their classmates.
The difference is huge because when we are getting them ready for school, we realize that those who have the 30 hours are doing much better in their communication skills, maths, literacy, everything, whereas those who have just the 15 hours are far behind their peers.
The government says it's investing £3.5 billion a year in free childcare. But for some parents getting the minimum 15 hours a week, the numbers don't add up. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Peckham.
Thames Water has agreed to pay out more than £11 million after overcharging businesses for their water. Investigators from the regulator Ofwat found the water company was using incorrect data to calculate bills. Almost 14,000 businesses were affected. At the age of 101, Christiane Lamb has some stories to tell. A wren in the Second World War and the Battle of the Atlantic, she later plotted the D-Day landing maps. She has put her memories into a new book. Katie Barnfield has more.
As a wren during World War II, helping to plot the D-Day landings, Christiane Lamb relied on her wits. Today, nearly 80 years later, they're still sharp.
I try to remember only funny things, really, because it's so boring to think of boring things.
Aged 101, she's just written her 5th book and has brought her daughter to the Savoy to celebrate its release.
World War II heroine, I call that something worth...
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Celebrating, exactly. Well, it's really just about me, mostly about my experience during the war, but quite a bit about when I was a child and how I grew up. Frightfully boring, really.
Wrens, as everybody knows, have been doing excellent service at scores of places, both at home and overseas.
Christian was one of the first to join the Wrens, the women's branch of the Royal Navy, when it was revived for the Second World War in 1939. Her new book is full of memories from the time, including meeting her late husband John when his ship came ashore for repairs.
The first thing they'd always do on arrival was to ring up the officers' mess and say, come and have a drink. So about half a dozen of us went down on this blind date, and this was where I first met John. And 10 days later we got engaged. That's the white velvet wedding dress, which my mother got for £7.
After marrying in 1943, it was here at the Savoy that Christian and John began their honeymoon. And true to form, some of the memories are still crystal clear.
This was a baby Austin which we were lent by a friend of my husband's right to the Savoy.
What's this here, a reference for you, for your wedding?
Oh yes, that was my wrens that worked for me, not known to be bossy. A slight tendency to madness during the past fortnight. That was when I was getting engaged.
You're 101, you've already written 5 books. What are your plans now for the future?
Well, I'm going to live an entirely selfish life, doing only things which absolutely I enjoy.
And after years of service to her country, who can blame her? Katie Barnfield, ITV News.
Weather now, here's Philippa.
Making the most of it, whatever the weather. Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
Good evening. Well, it may have been fairly quiet out there today and really more of the same tomorrow, but for the weekend it does look a little more unsettled. A spell of rain on Saturday, showers on Sunday before something drier and brighter takes hold as we start the new week. So this is what will happen over the next few days. We'll see low pressure moving in across the weekend, bringing spells of rain, but then for Monday and Tuesday, high pressure builds in nicely and it looks as though that high pressure will stick with us for much of the rest of the week. Out there at the moment then, mostly dry, any lingering showers from this afternoon and this evening afternoon clearing away eastwards, leaving behind a lot of cloud and a mild night all round. Tomorrow morning then quite cloudy once again to start, but some bright or sunny spells coming through. Little change into the afternoon, still the emphasis on quite cloudy conditions. Make the most of the sunshine where you find it, but where that sunshine comes through, highs around 23 Celsius, a little higher than today. Now we hold on to the fairly quiet conditions overnight into Saturday, but then you'll see this front starts to move in from the west and we will see rain heading our way later in the day. So a spell of rain later on Saturday, sunshine and showers come Sunday, drier, brighter and hopefully warmer for the new week.
Octopus Energy sponsors ITV London weekday weather.
And that is it. We're back on air tomorrow from just after 6 o'clock with updates in Good Morning Britain. Good night.